Hi, everybody. Today is Saturday, June 21st, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pep.
Nima, always a pleasure. I turned Russia upside down to be here with you tonight.
Thank
It's
you.
11 in Moscow. I just arrived from St. Petersburg to be here on time so we could do this relaxed, at least a little bit. Ah,
Let's let's get started, Pepe, with what's going on in the Middle East. The situation as time goes by is getting more dangerous, more fragile. And it seems that the United States is doing everything, just moving these fighter jets, bombers close to Iran. They're preparing for an attack on Iran. Even CNN reported that this sort of idea of 2 weeks, and there's somehow there it's a game of deception
of course.
to keep Tehran confused. Your take on what's going on?
Can I make an introduction, Nima, before I
Yeah,
answer your question?
go ahead.
Because we need to talk about St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
It was the most important forum in Russia this year. And I heard from Global South businessmen in St. Petersburg that for them it's much more important than Davos. Why? Because they're doing business. This morning, the organizers in St. Petersburg, they announced that, okay, this is not the final count. Over $80 billion of deals were signed in St. Petersburg. That's enormous by any standards. And the great thing is, these are global South deals. This is not international banking system. This is not BlackRock, the usual suspects. These are African nations. India and Pakistan were there. Uh, the Pakistanis, they sent ministers. The Gulf Cooperation Council, Bahrain was one of the guests of honor. Southeast Asia, everybody from Southeast Asia was there. And of course, scores of African nations. So, and obviously Central Asia, Russia, China. There was, just to give you an idea, there was in the middle of on Wednesday, there was Russia-China business panel, packed, totally packed. People out of the room because they couldn't get into the room. Businessmen from both sides, local governors in Russia, different oblasts, and everybody talking business. And uh, the local Russian governor saying, "Look, the Chinese are investing in this project. Amazing stuff." There was a wonderful panel which our friend Paulo Nogueira Batista, he was the star of the panel online. Can you imagine? Paulo talked online for less than 10 minutes and he stole the show. It was a panel about a possible reform of the international financial system. And the Russians, there was a Chinese, there was one Chinese as well. They were too careful. We have to go little by little, one step at a time, that. And Paulo says the real thing. No, no, we have to go for broke. And our window of opportunity is it's quite small. And the real important reforms, they have to start down, which is what the Russians were saying and working for last year before the BRICS summit in Kazan last year. Because as we all know, the summit is in Brazil this year, everything is slowing down the Brazilian way. Né? But at least we have people like Paulo, one of the founders of the NDB, New Development Bank. He knows that there's got to be a structural reform of the NDB and all that. And this is something that is practically not discussed even in Russia and in China. So, these kinds of conversations, only in a forum like this, you can have it. We had our own panel. I was on a panel on fake news, which went way beyond that because we were discussing control of information, artificial intelligence, and the fact that now fake news is going to be digitally produced by big tech itself. This is one of the key themes. There was, for instance, a very high-ranking executive of a Sberbank, the number one Russian bank, and he was giving figures about fake news, not only Russia, but absolutely astonishing. And of course, when you compare to the latest information about uh, Palantir, in fact, Palantir now is inside, embedded in the US federal government. So we have a huge AI company, okay, let's say among the top high tech companies in the West, now dictating policy, Nima. How serious is that? These people already do AI models for the Israelis to kill Palestinians. So, it's getting worse by the minute. And of course, these Russian friends, they started an organization that the merit of these organizations is enormous. It's called Global Fact Checking Network, uh, GFCN. You can find them online. They have their own website. Lots of people have joined, including myself. And we are trying to maybe set up a blueprint about uh, controlling fake news, checking fake news, and get this conversation going to the point that it would land on the BRICS table. Of course, it's not going to be in Rio in a few days, but the next BRICS summit next year in South Africa. And then if you have this discussed by the BRICS, there's a strong possibility that we can have, just an example, the beginning of BRICS net, or a BRICS tube, or all around BRICS alternative media sphere, because we cannot simply be subjected to the big tech platforms, because we know exactly where it's going. With the former PayPal mafia, with these very, very dangerous characters, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, and the fact that they are now part of the US government is even more dangerous. So the forum was, this forum is changing, Nima. It's great, because it used to be too generalistic until next year. This year, there were lots of panels. They were extremely practical, and people discussing possible solutions. Everything from geoeconomics to the IT sphere. And of course, the overarching theme, the dark cloud over all of us, is your question: Iran, Israel, and US. And what is US going to do? Everybody was waiting for the plenary session, which was yesterday, right? With President Putin. But first great thing about the plenary session, the global south was represented on stage at the plenary session. We had China, Indonesia, Bahrain, and South Africa. How cool is that? This is a sample of the global south. With the guest of honor, the president of Indonesia, Prabowo, Southeast Asia, which Putin sees as one of the two top areas of development in the near future: Southeast Asia and Africa. And of course, Putin indirectly, very diplomatically, he answered these questions about Iran. It's very clear in the Russian position. Iran has absolute inalienable rights to have a civilian nuclear program, which is what they have at the moment. Number one. Number two, Putin said that he received personal assurances from Trump and from Netanyahu that they are not going to bomb Bushehr plant, because there are over 200 ultra high-tech Russian technicians working at Bushehr. So obviously, we can imagine the conversation, right, Nima? Putin on the phone say, "Don't touch Bushehr," and the other two like this, because they know the consequences if that happens. Number three, extremely important. There's a lot of criticism, partially in Russia from, let's say, the Russian Atlanticist gang, but mostly across the global north, that Russia is not doing enough to help Iran. Putin said explicitly, these people who are peddling this notion, they are provocateurs. provokacji, literal translation from Russian. So this means we can infer that, of course, they are helping discreetly Iran in. And this is a taboo subject here, Nima. We cannot discuss this publicly. I asked people close to the government about it, no answers. So we discussed this with the people from think tanks, for instance. And the answer that they give is very similar to the answer that I received in Yemen when I asked a member of the High Political Council, what are exactly your relations with Russia and China? And basically he said, very diplomatically, yes, we have our own channels. So obviously, Tehran and Moscow, they have their own channels, and obviously nobody here is going to expose these channels. And what is the level of collaboration and help from Russia to Iran? Same thing about China. I discussed this, for instance, with my friend Professor Zhang Weiwei. He was in this China-Russia audience as well. Then he had to go to his own panel, and he said, "Of course there is, but this is not in the open and cannot be in the open in China, and it's not the Chinese way of doing it. The Chinese are extremely discreet, especially when it comes to helping a partner that for them is a matter of national security." As you know very well, Nima, it's not only that deal, which is not 10 years, it's actually 20 years, the $400 billion plus deal between Iran and China, energy and infrastructure. So it's a matter of national security for China. And whatever happens, Iran will have China's back. China will have Iran's back. I'm sorry. So it was good to have, even if we had, let's say, terse and tentative answers, but basically you got answers to these questions, you know. And it was good that this came out in the plenary session, especially. Apart from that, just to close this introduction, the atmosphere was buzzing everywhere. You could feel that there were deals being struck all the time. I gave an example in my Telegram column. I interviewed high-powered Chinese CEO dressed Hong Kong style. She said she's going to she's going to live in Hong Kong next year. Currently, she is in Beijing. Her company wants to invest in Donetsk. This is something that nobody in the West knows, in fact. Then my Donbass friends, they organized an interview with the number 2 of Donetsk. Great guy. And he said, look, it's not only this lady that you just talked to. Every day I receive inquiries from Chinese companies. They want to come here and see the investment possibilities. And he said, minerals, obviously, coal, for obvious reasons. Donbass is a coal oblast or republic. Transportation, which includes connectivity corridors overland and maritime via Mariupol, and tourism, because they know the possibilities of tourism, including for China, because it's a beautiful region. Mariupol could become quite something, a mix of a special economic zone, important port, and a tourism hub as well. So if you don't go to a forum like this, you are literally blinded by the Western narrative. And of course, everybody, I talked to people from Astrakhan, for instance, which is part of the International North-South Transportation Corps. They love talking to foreign journalists and analysts because they are, of course, it's impossible for them to talk to the West. And they're doing absolutely amazing stuff. In terms of integration, they talk about how the federal government is investing a lot in all these oblasts and these public-private partnerships. So this is just to give you and our audience a small glimpse of how important this forum was. Even all of us hostages of this absolutely horrendous situation in West Asia, You have over 10,000 people over there for 3 days nonstop, networking and doing business. So this is the future. And it's no wonder that one of the most important quotes from Putin during his plenary session is that he said, we not only we Russia, we are betting on BRICS as the future, but we are betting on the constitution of a new growth model with everything that implicates new growth model, something completely different to what we have since 1945.
When it comes to, you mentioned the situation in the Middle East, in the West Asia between Iran and Israel was discussed. How, as I mentioned in my first question, what is the latest development in the region? How do you find in the West, when you look at the mainstream media in the West, they're saying Iran was defeated, Iran was destroyed, and unbelievable what's going on in the mainstream media. They're totally changing the reality of what's going on there. Your
Because
take?
they're a machine of fake news, Nima. We know that. In fact, in my panel, I described Brussels as a fake news machine. In fact, the whole collective, fragmented, decaying West is a fake news machine against anything. It can be Iraq, it can be Syria, it can be Libya, it can be Somalia, and now it can be Gaza and especially Iran, not to mention everything concerning Russia. Everything that escapes that little tiny window, which we call collective West, which in terms of Europe basically is a very, very small peninsula of the big Eurasian continent. And of course, the US, which in the fabulous definition of Bismarck, oh, of course they are safe. On both sides, they are surrounded by fish. It's a beautiful definition, of course. So, well, and obviously, the US is even more provincial than Europe. Europe, at least you have nodes of, looking around the world and trying to establish a relationship with the world, even if it's not mutual respect. But the US is a completely different story. It always go back to manifest destiny, exceptionalism, shiny city on the hill, all that crap, regurgitated ad infinitum. And for instance, the way they are incapable of understanding not only how the Iranian system works, how do they make decisions, what constitutes an existential threat to Iran, how Iran deals with his neighbors, with the Arab world, and with Eurasia at large, and how Iran has been preparing for this war now for decades because they knew, not because they are crystal ball readers, but because they knew it would be inevitable. It's a war of the turbo capitalist system against the Islamic Revolution. This is the key. And now the people behind it, they think that they have an opening. For instance, I have a lot of respect for Cy Hirsch. When I was growing up, when I was still in college, Cy Hirsch was one of my role models as an investigative journalist. But Cy, there's a problem with Cy because, first of all, he doesn't know West Asia very well, which is an enormous problem if you are an investigative journalist. Well, he basically concentrates in Washington and his gigantic Rolodex. He can pick up the phone and talk to anybody he wants in Washington. This is fantastic. Nobody has that kind of access, right? But for instance, he writes a piece that is absolutely terrifying this week on his Substack, basically reproducing what his sources, which are deep industrial military complex, deeper industrial military complex, and Zionist silos working around Washington, Virginia, and Maryland. And what is it about? It's about the war that they always wanted since at least 1998. If some of them, they want this war since 1979, as you know very well. Regime change in Iran, elimination of the Iranian civilian nuclear program, elimination of Islamic ballistic missiles, basically destroying Iran like they destroyed Iraq, without thinking, obviously, for 1 minute about Iranian capabilities, geography, you name it. Of course not. These people do. First of all, they don't understand. They never learn anything from geography, history, and both. So when you read Sy-Hersh's piece, it is terrifying. The level of stupidity and ignorance of these people is terrifying. But the problem is, some of these people interviewed by Hersh, they have access to decision making in Washington, and that's what makes it even more dangerous. And it's quite a collection of sources, you know. So if these people actually believe in what they're doing, so we better get ready for some sort of apocalypse, really. Apocalypse later, not apocalypse now. And proving once again that the system in the US is irredeemable. It cannot be changed. They will only change if they were destroyed completely, which is not gonna, we know it's not gonna happen. They're still very, very powerful. Even if they were defeated by the Houthis, and now they want to be defeated by the IRGC, right? It took 1 month for the Houthis to destroy now, to completely defeat and humiliate the US Navy. So now they want to repeat that with the IRGC. That's a really bad move. But that's where we're going, apparently. So it is, in every respect, Nima, it's terrifying. Because these people, they are not illiterate. They are not completely dumb, but they are fanatic. They are extremely misinformed. They have positions of power in the nomenclatura in the US government and around the US government. And that's what makes them even more terrifying. So in a sense, Sy-Hersh's piece was, it was a public service for him to publish something like this. I like his style because he's not judgmental. Basically, he's reproducing what people told him, you know. But wow, it's one of the most terrifying things I have read in my long life around the world, really.
Pepe, when it comes to the attack on Iran and the way that Iran has responded so far, if Israel is winning, what does Donald Trump need to interfere in the conflict? Why do they need to go and bomb Iran? Israel is winning, so let them win the war.
They
What's
can't.
going on that
Nima, they can't win this war. You know that. I know that. Most of our audience, I'm sure, knows that. In fact, they are losing already. They lost the strategic initiative. They lost the aura of invincibility. For them, I would say that this is a psychological coup, even worse than losing everything. Nobody is afraid of the Israelis anymore. Everybody knows that they are a killing machine, but it's very, very convenient to be a killing machine, killing women, children, hospitals, journalists, humanitarian help, etc., from above with missiles. Try to match yourself against a real regional power. They are having their ass kicked little by little, the Iranian way, because Iran for the moment hasn't entered a war against Israel. They are probing. It's a sort of a little by little escalation to achieve strategic deterrence, which in some aspects they already have. There are some serious gaps in their anti-aircraft defenses and anti-missile defenses, which they might get help from Russia to plug these holes if they wanted. I'm quoting Putin again. Putin said, we offered some stuff to Iran. Iran said, no, we don't want it, at least for now. If they want it, Russia is willing to help them any way they can. So even with the fact that they continue to be attacked by Israel, several raids a day, missiles, targeted assassinations, you name it, but the destruction that they already inflicted in Tel Aviv and beyond is now unimaginable for everyone. Nobody could ever imagine that missiles will be destroying neighborhoods in Israel, landing near Dimona, destroying most of the port of Haifa. The mayor of Haifa is desperate now. He's begging for peace because his port sooner or later is going to disappear. Just like Eilat was bankrupt, Haifa will disappear. It's not. It's not in the equation anymore. The oil refinery in Haifa, same thing. So Israel now has, I would say, of their three ports, they have maybe 30% left in Ashdod, which is near Gaza, so it's not very well located. The other two are, well, one of them is non-existent, and the other one is slowly sinking. So there is a different strategy that was re-elaborated probably in the first 48 hours by the IRGC and say, okay, now it's different. Now it's not strategic patience anymore. We're going to go best by 1,000 cuts. And it's working. It's working because the number one objective is very ambitious, is to paralyze the Israeli economy. And they are on the way to do that, Nima. Seriously, with only 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, huh? With 2 weeks.
1 week. It started on Friday last week. Yeah.
So exactly, we lose track.
Yeah.
Everything is so fast. So a little over 1 week, they already paralyzed, we can say, maybe half of the Israeli economy, at least. And these attacks on Rafael, on the Weizmann Institute, on Unit 8200, this is pinpointed. This is absolutely key. These are the key intel military nodes in Israel. Poof. So, the Iranian strategy is millimetrically calculated, we can say. It is working. They are paying a horrendous price, no question, because Iran continues to be bombed. They bombed the Arak reactor, right?
Yeah.
Targeting assassinations in Qom, near the shrine in Qom. So there are no limits for these gangsters. But we can say with a measure of certainty that Khamenei and the RGC, they see the big picture ahead. Of course, if the Americans get, 4 B-2s dropping 4 bombs exactly at the same time, virtually on the spot over Fordo, then it's a completely new ballgame, as we know.
Which, by the way, which is not that much possible. I talk about it because when you first hit the target, the explosion, whatever is happening in the aftermath of that impact, you're not going to be able to hit the target again at the same point.
At the same point, exactly, Nima. Not to mention smoke, debris, etc. You need perfect visibility on top of it for your hits. So can you imagine that there's absolutely no one at the Pentagon to tell the President of the United States how completely absurd this whole idea is? Apparently not, right? And the guy who's in charge, that major imbecile Kurila, who is an anti-Iranian Islamophobe, whatever, no wonder, no? He's the guy in charge of the whole operation, and he's the guy convincing Trump. And the whole notion is so absurd that even Trump himself apparently is not convinced. Of course, I would say a 5-year-old would not be convinced. But that's where we are, and it gets more serious by the minute. And I'm sure Putin already, via their privileged channels, already told Trump, look, you have no idea what awaits you if you go along with this. But at the same time, Nima, we all know it's not Trump who's making this decision. The decision has already been made by the usual suspects behind. They are forcing him to, of course, give the green light. It's a completely different story. And there are echoes and shades telling us that he's now afraid because he is totally trapped in his own rhetorical game and in the Ziocon's long running game that comes since the end of the 1990s. He's in an untenable position. And we can already say that he lost the midterms. His base, half of his base is gone already. So bye bye. He's going to be a lame duck after the midterms. Not to mention they might advance to try to impeach him again. So it's wow, the accumulation of horrors and absurdities is never ending, right? And when you, of course, all of us who, for professional reasons, we have to at least get a glimpse of what mainstream media is saying. They live in what kind of no, obviously these people don't live in reality, but what kind of nether world they live? Huh? And peddling the notion that I know it's the president of the United States is like God. He can decide one day to do, or Zeus. He can decide one day to throw a lightning bolt, and the other day, okay, let's have a banquet. He decides the future of the world. No, he doesn't decide anything. There are people deciding for him. He's basically a lowly messenger, a cheap messenger, a casino hustler, a mobster, a sub-mobster. So it was good to have a few inside info and commentary from people in St. Petersburg, well-positioned people in the Russian government, especially. They have no illusions, of course. And once again, they all come back to the same point. We have a war here in our borders. First, we need to solve this. And now they're fully concentrated. What's going to happen in the next few months? The conditions are going to be much, much, much tougher if not Kiev, but Kiev's sponsors don't accept what's on the table, put on the table by the Russians. And meanwhile, they keep organizing forums like this. So the whole of the global south can get together and strike business deals. So there's always the other side of the coin, Nima, right? The auspicious side of the coin, even in the middle of such darkness.
What was so important about the point that Putin raised in St. Petersburg? He said that Russia and Iran are fighting the same forces.
See, this was brilliant. Wow. Everybody knows what he means. He doesn't need to get into detail. And Putin doesn't, he never needs to spell out, okay, he needs to spell out, especially for Kiev. But when he's talking to a broad audience, which in this case was a global audience, everybody was waiting. Okay, what is he going to say about Iran? This is possibly the key quote, because you can interpret this at several levels. And at the same time, he said something very crucial, which explains a lot of his, let's say, circumspection when he deals with Israel. He says, look, we have almost 1.5 million former USSR and Russian citizens, double passports, living in Israel, speaking Russian. So Israel, in many aspects, is also a Russian land. He has to take this into consideration, of course. So it's his, compared to Trump, his position is Of course, it's solid, but the nuances are extremely complex. But because he has a legal mind, he is a strategist, and he weighs everything before making a big decision. At least we have a rational mind calculating all the vectors, right? But at the same time, he's not going to abandon his principles, which is Iran is a very strong ally of the Russian Federation. They have mutual interests, they have business deals. Russia is helping Iran in their civilian nuclear program, and they are not backing down from any of that. So this is clear. And the Americans who know how to read, for them, this is also clear. Obviously, from the Zionist axis point of view, this doesn't change anything because they're fanatics. And now they think that they have the Holy Grail in front of them, regime change in Iran, which once again, Cy Hirsch's piece was about how we're going to achieve regime change in Iran. This should have been the title, in fact, the headline.
What were the main points that he was mentioning? Because so far I don't see anything in that sense is happening in Iran. The main goal of these attacks, assassination, decapitation, as they call it,
Yes.
was to somehow bring so-called regime change in Iran. That didn't work so far.
Shock and awe, Nima. All of us who remember shock and awe in 2003, in Iraq it worked, but Iraq was already dissolved as a nation. I went to, in 2002, I spent 1 month in Iraq during Saddam. It was around September, October, so a few months before shock and awe. And I saw by myself how the country was impoverished after how many? 20 years, almost 20 years of sanctions, destroyed. The only thing that more or less worked was the Mukhabarat, the intel services. It would be very easy if the Americans launched, and it was. And even like that, it took three weeks for the whole thing to collapse. And it only collapsed because they distributed a lot of money to Saddam's generals. Iran is solid. Even, of course, there is opposition to the government, especially in North Tehran, the upper middle class, the people who dream of Iran under the Shah, etc. But it's a minority in Iran. And the fact that now the nation was attacked directly, it unified the nation completely, as you know very well, Nima. But try to explain this in Washington. Nobody will understand. First of all, these idiots never been to Iran. They don't know how it works. They don't know anything. The culture, history, how the system works, you name it. Different levels of popularity if you compare Khuzestan with Mashhad, with the Caspian, with the Persian Gulf, etc. They don't know anything. They only have the obsession. We need to get rid of Khamenei. We have to kill him. And then we're going to have the son of the Shah to be our guy. The level of stupidity is exactly what I just told you.
Pepe, Dmitry Medvedev said, he tweeted on Twitter, he said on X, if the West wants nuclear disarmament, start with Israel. Iran won't back down, no matter the threats. These are one of the most, I would say, important words that came out of someone like Medvedev, who's very important when it comes to the foreign policy of Russia.
Is the
It's
number
second,
two.
the number two, yeah.
Exactly. It is, Dima, because Medvedev can say what Putin cannot say explicitly. So we should always pay attention to what he's saying. This is what they discuss behind closed doors. At the Security Council meetings or among them, etc. And Medvedev can. Yes, this is very, very, very serious. Absolutely. And once again, it looks like nobody in Washington in a position of power or in a position to control foreign policy is listening, to their detriment. If they get into this adventure, which as it stands, there is a strong possibility. No, none of us know, but all the signs are that something will happen and something nefarious will happen. And something like a mother of all mistakes might occur. So they're going to pay a heavy, heavy price for it.
The problem is in the West, when they want to go to war, there's so much somehow melted in their own rhetoric that they cannot hear anything from
Oh, they cannot
outside.
hear anything.
They
No,
feel that they're gonna achieve what they want to achieve by this sort of war against other nations. But after all, we know that it doesn't work the way that they were talking about this. Iran is not other countries like Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm sure today I talked with Professor Marandi. He said
okay,
we're prepared to fight the United States. We
absolutely.
are totally prepared to fight it and come in and do it. We are prepared to respond to you. I it's not just about Iran. Yemen just announced that if the United States dares to attack Iran, they're gonna attack the United States in the Red Sea in Bab el Mandab. These two important. It's somehow, and on the other hand, I heard something from China. I don't know the political analyst Victor Gao from China. Here is what he said.
Torgau is very good. He's
Yeah,
very competent.
here is what he said in terms of if the United States attacks Iran.
Back against aggressors. And if the United States wants to join Israel to become an aggressor against Iran, well, history will eventually have its own verdict. If other countries want to join the fight on the side of Israel, I will urge them to stop that right away. And if, for example, other countries want to join the fight against Iran, you never want to exclude the possibility that other major countries want to fight together with Iran, because the war imposed on Iran is the unjustified war. It's a war of aggression. It's undeclared war. It's a surprise attack. And any people, any country under such surprise attack, an attack of aggression, has full legal justification to fight back.
Yeah.
What Victor is saying, it's very important, Nima, because this is essentially the position of the leadership in Beijing. It's exactly the same position, which they express, of course, very politely in the briefings of the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Beijing and all that. But this is their position. And it's implied that if that happens, they will help Iran in ways that none of us can imagine what would be. The Chinese way, of course, discreet, made in the shade.
Yeah. They don't talk about it. We've seen that in Ukraine. We know how they act. How they don't talk about it. Even
Yes.
with the case of Russia, Iran, when Iran was somehow sending drones to Russia, nobody was talking about it. You remember that?
Yes, of course.
These countries are helping each other without talking about it, unlike what the United States and Europeans do.
Yes, because they are masters of narrative twisting and blah, blah, blah. And Russia, Iran, and China, they have interlocked strategic partnerships. It's on a completely different level. There's no comparison. Civilization states who have interlocking strategic partnerships and have the same interest, and they are all on board on the main theme of the Forum of St. Petersburg until yesterday, the construction of an integrated Eurasia. And they are the three top actors. We cannot say India is one of the top actors. Definitely not. By the way, there were not many. There was a sizable Indian delegation in St. Petersburg, but they didn't say anything remotely consequential. And their position is, for instance, I'm sure you noticed that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization blatantly condemned Israel in an official communique. Guess who was not part of the condemnation? India. So the other SCO members are already looking at India. They say, do they really belong here? You see? And it's completely stupid because they depend on Russia, they depend on Iran. They are partners in the international north-south transportation corridor, which is a lifeline, a commercial lifeline for them. But the relationship between New Delhi and Tel Aviv is, wow, this is quite something. And of course, don't forget the ideological affinities between Zionism and Hindutva supremacism. That's not good at all, you know.
Axis, Pepe, Axis reported that the United States tried to set up a meeting with Iran in Istanbul, but
Yes, it didn't work.
Iran supreme leader, refused to talk with the United States. But we know that the Iranian foreign minister went to Europe. He talked with foreign ministers of the United Kingdom and the United Kingdom together with Germany and France. The outcome of those talks, they were just repeating the same sort of demands on the part of the United States, no enrichment. Even they want to bring in the missile, the missile program of Iran. Unbelievable. I don't know if it seems as time goes by, Iran sees no solution but fighting the United States.
Yes. The Chihuahuas, you saw the Chihuahuas were demanding zero enrichment. Who the hell are the Chihuahuas to demand anything from a sovereign nation? Especially because these imbeciles were part of the original JCPOA. Germany was an observer in JCPOA. It was the P3 plus one, that was called. I think P3 plus one. Germany was part of Vienna. I can't believe that. Well, okay, let's say that they had slightly less imbecile leaderships at the time. Okay, which is true, technically, in fact.
It was P5 plus one, if I'm not.
I'm sorry, Nima. Yes, P5 plus one. The 5 of the UNSC plus Germany, exactly. And now they're okay, zero enrichment. Okay, in fact, zero everything. Get rid of everything, be invaded, and we want regime change. Basically, this is what they're saying. Gosh.
Pepe, you said that you lost the about the date of the when the war between actually it wasn't the war, it was the Israeli attack on Iran started on June 13, on Friday. They started this fight.
You're right. It started on a Friday. Is that because
it was 2 days before Sunday that they were going to talk in Oman, if I'm not mistaken, between the United States and
in Oman. Yeah. You're right, Nima, exactly. So, but I lost track because you go crazy in our case.
Yeah, it's all I totally understand that. Since then, they've received 14 weapon shipments from the United States and Germany to just sustain.
Certainly interceptors. We don't know what's inside of it, but okay, if we want to bet, interceptors, because they are actually running from out of intercept. We can see that they are not only they are intercepting much less, but they are very, very careful with how many interceptors they're going to launch, because they know that it's dwindling. And it's part of the Iranian strategy once again. And did the Iranians lose anything important so far? On the contrary, they got rid of all their older missiles. And what were the older missiles doing? Depleting the interceptor fleet. Let's put it this way. Brilliant. Straight to the point. Very simple. Obviously, nobody thought about it, the Israelis and the Americans, and both. Proves once again that it works. Simple strategies do work. So wait until Iran starts to sending volleys of their latest editions, the Haji Qasem, Fatah 2, you name it. Wow. But they are guarding this for the second stage, which certainly is the calculations that they have that the United States sooner or later would enter the war. Just like Russia in many aspects, It's still saving the best that they have for the possibility later on of NATO and the United States having ideas about Russia. So there are similarities. And this is something that they can discuss at the highest level, strategic level, Ministry of Defense level, and all that. Look, we're fighting more or less the same war. Yes, it is the same war. It's the same forever war in two different theaters, with the same backers on the other side and with the same objectives. And the objective number one is to plunder the natural wealth of both Russia and Iran, and to prevent, by all means necessary, Eurasia integration with both of them, with China especially, and everybody in between and around them. It's as simple as that. And it's as complex as that. So nothing is by accident in this progression. If we look at the progression since Maidan to Ukraine, to the SMO, to the how the SMO is going to be resolved, to the negotiations on the Russian front, negotiations on the Iranian front, the state that we are now, we are on the brink of the US entering another forever war. Everything makes sense. It's a progression, Nima. Absolutely. Our friend Sergei Glaziev, he gave the short version of we are discussing now. And he said, and level 3 was Ukraine. So it didn't work. So they are on level 4. Level 4 is to go against Iran. And level 5 will be against China. We are entering level 4 now. Absolutely. And they are desperate because there's nothing they can do in terms of level 3. They're going to start a nuclear war against Russia. They will lose. Do they have what it takes to attack Russia? No, they don't. In every aspect. Are they going to accept that they have been strategically defeated by Russia? No, they won't. Will that change anything? No, it won't. So, okay, you change the subject, which is exactly where we are now. They changed the subject. Okay, regime change in Iran. Let's see if it works. No, it won't work. So they'll be even more desperate after that. What are they going to do? False flag in Taiwan? So, when you put this all when you follow the process and you put this all together, you see the level of desperation, Nima, of these people. Because usually when we have a situation like this in the world, okay, the solution is a war to reset the system. It's what happened from 39 to 45. Now, if you launch a war, you will reset the system, but against you. And that's what makes them even more abysmally desperate. There's no other way that the war will work in their favor. Ukraine proved that, and something that is unimaginable for several generations. Israel sold the myth to everybody that they were invincible. Bye-bye. Not anymore. Your myth is shattered, and they won't be able to live with that. And in the mid to long term, they will vote with their feet. They will go back to Eastern Europe, where they came from, because none of these people are Semites. But this is a long process. It's starting now. So it's fascinating how the angel of history, to get one of my favorite images of all time by Walter Benjamin, the angel of history is looking back, over his shoulder to the past, but he cannot move into the future because he's encumbered by all the horrors of the past in front of him. But sometimes, let's say he turns his head again, he starts looking at the future again. I said, oh, there is a glimmer of light over there. So even if I am in shackles here, I can maybe, have one step. We may be at this point now, angel of history correction of all the horrors unleashed by that construct in West Asia. So that Of course, and this involves unimaginable suffering and horrors. But always you have to pay. History is not free for anybody. Né? You have to pay, and even the winners, or even the peoples, cultures, civilizations who resurrect, they have to pay a horrible price for it. In the case of Russia, they had to pay the 90s. Their purge and their Valley of Tears for Russia was the 90s. They started to resurrect in the 2000s. And look where they are now. The first part of Putin's speech in St. Petersburg, I'm sure many of you have seen, was detailing the success of the Russian economy, the fourth largest economy in the world by PPP now, even being the most sanctioned nation state probably in history. So there are always ways of, the phoenix rising again. So, okay, all that to say, in a somewhat convoluted way, forgive me, all of you, that maybe this could be the beginning for a resurrection of Palestine later on. Because if the Zionism machine is shattered, they will naturally dissolve, and that thing will dissolve. And they will go back to Poland, Ukraine, even Russia, Eastern Europe in general. And that's it. And the land will return to their rightful owners.
Here is Pepe. Here is what Donald Trump said.
Yes.
Foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, he feels that he's winning, Pepe.
Nima, they're not giving him the right information. It's simple as that. It's obvious. He doesn't know anything that's going on over there, obviously. And he doesn't read. Once again, we already discussed that many times. A president that doesn't read and works by TV talking points and sound bites, of course, he's a hostage.
It wasn't a long time ago he said we're gonna go and destroy Houthis, destroy Yemenis, and he
saw what happened now,
capitulated. Right? And we're gonna go. We're not gonna fight. I don't know how in the world he's thinking that the situation with Iran would be different for the United States, while they know they can, if to be honest, they can destroy infrastructures, all of these locations, but after all, they're not going to be able to defeat Iran.
Of course not.
It's yeah.
But there's nobody capable of telling him that around him in his circle of power, and much less in the industrial military complex. Of course, our friends, independent analysts, with their experience inside the deep state, they could explain this for him in 5 minutes. Ray McGovern could meet Trump and tell him 5 minutes, look, the whole thing is absurd. But would he listen? Of course not, even if that happened.
The United States has brought their fighter jet to Saudi Arabia. Do you believe if they wanted to attack Iran, they would use Saudi Arabia? Because I would say that would be the end of Saudi Arabia. That would be the end of Saudi family.
Well, MBS is losing sleep on all that. Obviously, he knows. MBS is not a fool. He may be a gangster, but he's not a fool. Yeah. We don't know how let's say, the background infrastructure to help an American attack on Iran, what they would use. Anything that they use will be a legitimate target for Iran. And this has been explicitly outlined by everybody that is in power in Tehran over and over again. And obviously the GCC, they know, of course. And they have, of course, and they have diplomatic dialogue. all of them. Iran is talking to Saudi Arabia. Iran is talking to Qatar with UAE. Everybody knows that. And obviously they are terrified because it will be a unilateral decision. It will be not a Tel Aviv decision, it will be a Washington decision. So it's the empire that will, okay, which vessels I'm going to use for this operation. And the vessels caught in the net, they cannot say bye-bye, you know.
In the case of Iran, I remember when the war in Ukraine started, how cautious Russia was, even is today, considering the war in Ukraine. I see the same sort of attitude, Pepe, in Iran. I talk with Iranians. They're not going totally out against Israel because they know they're waiting for something bigger than Israel. They want
Exactly.
the United States to come and then show what they can do with Israel or even with the Arab states. And I don't know if in the United States, these people, the same people who were somehow cheering, how helping the case of Ukraine for more than 3 years in the
Mm,
conflict, which literally destroyed Ukraine. They're arguing that if we go against Iran, if we attack Iran, that would change the game. That would be devastating. We're gonna destroy Iranian nuclear facilities and all of that. We know these sort of rhetorics. They want to make the case for the administration to go after the plan to attack Iran. They don't care about the outcome.
of
They
course
don't
not.
care about what's going on in the aftermath of that attack. But that would be the end of Donald Trump and his administration, in my opinion, because look at what's going on in the United States with MAGA. Look at what's going on with Tucker Carlson. It's not just about Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz. Somehow they tried to convince or somehow put pressure on Tulsi Gabbard. She backed down in her recent tweet on X.
Mm,
But after all, you cannot change the base. You cannot change the mindset of those people who voted for you, who
mm,
wanted some sort of change. These are big things that are happening in my opinion, in the mind of Donald Trump himself
mm.
before going to Iran. It's not just about Iran, it's about the future of the United States.
Absolutely. Um, well, once again, he's caught in a net, in a very elaborated trap set up by the Zionist axis, and he's expendable, Nima. He's another expendable US president. If his presidency implodes because of a out of control, stupid adventure in Iran, the Zionist axis will continue and they will find another one to implement what they always wanted from the beginning. That's what is so terrifying. And it's another conclusion out of the Cy Hirsch column. It doesn't matter. You read the column from back to back and say, these people live in a sort of delirium tremens, all of them. Yes, it was always like this, and it's not going to change unless they are eliminated from the levers of power in the US government. And you know, this is not going to happen. And if it was going to take maybe it could take decades or generations. Just like those mega fanatic settlers in the West Bank, there's no other way to get rid of them except I don't need to spell out, right? Otherwise, they'll keep, the virus will continue indefinitely. So we are all hostages of this. I use it in the title of one of my columns, a death cult. And the death cult is not only Israel. The death cult is impregnated in the tissue of the US government. We all know Eisenhower alerted everybody about it. We all know that JFK was fighting against it. And we all know what happened afterwards.
Yeah. Pepe, Europeans, United Kingdom and Germany are helping the Israel.
Of
And
course.
even United Kingdom is preparing the fighter jets to go to the region to help the United States. You look at the situation, you've mentioned that before, but they're literally the same people that fight in Iran. They're talking about the United States, but when it's not just the United States, Germany is in, the United Kingdom is in, and they're talking. And Iran has no problem with these countries, and they're participating in the attack on Iran. If they attack Iran, they're going to be part of that attack. I literally think that China is looking at what's going on. Russia is looking at what's going on, and they say, "So who are you to support? Who are you to come to fight Iran? You have no problem with Iran. It's all about Iran and Israel. The United States wants to back Israel. They can come in fight Iran. What it has to do with Germany and the United Kingdom? Unless you think that the Israeli project is a British project, they need to go."
Germany and France are inconsequential. So whatever they do, nobody cares because they are inconsequential. The Brits is different. It's MI6. So it's regime change. For the Brits is regime change. It's the same. The way MI6 and the British ruling classes look at Iran is exactly the way the Zionists look at Iran. Regime change. We need a puppet over there, and we need to make a lot of money out of Iran's natural resources. And of course, block is actually this association between Russia, Iran, and China. This is what really matters, Nima, in the European theater. France and Germany, they don't even qualify as inconsequentials. Nobody cares. Their army, they cannot fight a war in a bathtub. So, inconsequential.
The outcome, Pepe, if the United States finally decides to attack Iran, I would say they're not going to be able to do regime change, so-called regime change. They're not going to be able to defeat Iran, but the outcome would be devastating for the future. And the way that the United States wants to have some sort of leverage or some sort of strategic partnership in the Middle East, that's going to be gone. These Arab states would be destroyed. I would say it before it happening. I would confess that they're going to do this. They're going to do it. This is insanity. This is unbelievable what Donald Trump is playing with. We know how capable Iran is. You can hit Iran so hard, but they're going to fight back. They're going to destroy whatever you have in that region, in the Middle East. I don't know if there is anybody in the Trump administration or
there's not. So that would be my question to you, Nima. Your conversations with the Iranians this past few days. This is a national consensus. If the U.S. enters the war, we will fight with everything that we can.
It's the end. It's the end of oppositions. It's the end of anything that the West was somehow investing in for many years. For many years, these people. You see the crown, the son of Shah of Iran coming out and coordinating with Israelis and Americans in terms of fighting. He was asked, do you care about it? The British media was asking him, do you care about the Israelis are attacking civilians in Iran? Said, they don't want to attack civilians.
He actually said that.
He said this.
Wow.
These people are totally in bed with what's going on. And they want to divide Iran in oblasts. They want to Kurds, Turks, Arabs, Baluchis, and all of this. This is the main goal, the end game on their part, in my opinion. And Iran knows this. These are huge. These are smart people. These are not some ordinary people talking about it, because they want to hear the argument on the part of the West. They know what they're doing, and they were preparing for this. They knew that this would come to them.
This reminds me, Nima, one of the things that struck me last month. It's incredible. I was in Iran last month. When I went to Sistan, Baluchistan, finally, the people that I talk, Sistani is more to the north, of the huge province, as you know, and the Baluchis. We were interacting with Baluchis all the time. They see themselves first and foremost as Iranians. They're not separatists at all. Even though the province is enormous, has a very peculiar history, is very far away from the center. No, but they see themselves as Iranians. And the development of Chabahar port, it's for the good of Iran. So it is this feeling of national unity. You see it in the Caspian. I saw that in the Caspian as well. Same thing. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's all over. You cannot analyze Iran based on the differences between North Tehran, wealthy, and South Tehran, proletarian. No, it's much more complex than that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what would happen, but I don't see anything.
What's your feeling, Nima? Seriously, without geopolitical analysis, what's your feeling? What's your feeling?
My feeling is from what I'm hearing from inside from Iran, as time goes by and these attacks are continuing on Iranian people, the unity is growing stronger among Iranian. You see all people, those liberals that you've mentioned in the northern part of Tehran coming together with the southern part of Tehran, with those villages in Iran, all united. I can confess that, Pepe, I live in Brazil, you know that, and I do see the feeling when it comes to Iran, the feeling that came out of this attack on Iran, unprovoked attack on Iran, is bringing something to the society that the society wasn't experiencing it since the war against Saddam Hussein. There's is something new happening inside the society, and nobody knows. They're gonna fight. These people would fight the United States to the last one. They're gonna fight back. And I hope there is somebody in the United States hearing what's going on, seeing the reality of what's going on, not through the propaganda. These people who were simply receiving money to manipulate the analysis on their part from Iran. These mostly Iranians who are living outside of Iran, trying to give false pictures to the administration in the United States, in Europe, because they're receiving, they're somehow they're puppets of the.
Many are being paid, actually.
Yeah. That's why I'm seeing this is totally dangerous. This is dangerous. I don't want to see anything happening in that region. We had a lot with Gaza, with the Palestine, with the case of, and again they're trying to do it. I don't see anything. I don't see the United States winning. I see United States losing, and losing big in the West Asia. They're gonna learn it if they go with the attack on Iran. They're gonna learn it. They're gonna find something that has never happened before to the United States. It's something big. It's something big. There must be, there shall be prepared. They shall prepare for that. In my opinion, it's the only thing that I can say. But I don't see the sanity in the administration. I was somehow I was hoping that these people, like the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, would be the voice of sanity. He's not. He's just trying to. He's not doing anything. Look at Tulsi Gabbard. We were talking about Cash Patel. Who's he? He's unbelievable. The worst thing with the Biden administration, at least we know that they wouldn't let Netanyahu wanted to attack Iran during the Biden administration. They didn't let him. They didn't let him to attack. But Trump administration is somehow, we had a lot of hope in the administration. It's just gone, all gone.
Well, everything you said makes total sense compared to what I'm hearing, the echoes I'm getting from Iran. Absolutely. And it's very impressive that in only a matter of few days, people understand the bigger picture. Not only the unprovoked attack by Israel per se, but everything that implies, and it's a camouflaging. It's the same old imperial story. They could never digest the Islamic Revolution with all the problems of the Islamic Revolution, but it's ingrained in them. They need revenge for what they lost, and now they think that they have this small window of opportunity. And as you said correctly, they will regret it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pepe, for being
So
with
much.
us today.
I wish we had more
Yeah.
auspicious things to talk about, but that's it. That this is our
The
gloomy
reality.
reality. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's hitting us.
Hope
Muito
to see
obrigado, Pepe.
you in Brazil.
See you soon in Brazil. See you soon.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao,
Thank you.
ciao. Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye.